successful logo design. Yes, that's a picture of me and my happy smiling face, and hopefully you will enjoy this video. I often get called on to create logo designs for companies, and there's typically 5 C's I like to say when it comes to logo design to design a successful logo. And one is cost. Now, cost, as strange as it might be, can be as high as $5,000, $1,000, $500, all the way down to do-it-yourself for free. And so looking at this low end, obviously you know what do-it-yourself is, but what's a $100 logo? Very often companies don't need a full logo. They need what's called a disposable design. I had a client come to me, and this is just sort of a fake representation of their logo, but what they needed was a basic logo very fast. The guy was going to a bank, he had a new business plan, and he just needed a logo to put on a business card. So I took a circle, I sliced it up because it was Stacks Financial Group, so I made it look like some sort of a stack, and that was it. And he paid me $100, and that was it. Sometimes a logo design doesn't have to be all that earth-shattering. At the low end of the scale, there is something called disposable design. And if you think about it, a lot of singers don't have a logo. If you look around today, Lady Gaga, what's her logo? If you think back to something like the Beatles or Led Zeppelin, what are their logos? Now, Led Zeppelin has had many Led Zeppelin graphics on some of their albums, but they really don't have a logo per se. That is, most of us can't picture what a logo is for many of these bands. So a disposable design's okay. You don't need to have a full design brief, etc. when you're creating a logo. But some companies do want to have that. And the whole idea is that we look at, as you move up in the pricing for logo design, we start looking at different factors. So the second C is color. And I will explain to you what the other pricing ranges typically are for. But let's go through the other C's first. If you want to do a logo design on your own, I'm going to give you all the tools you need. And the second C is color. And you can see here, this is a basic chart that gives you a sense of what colors are with respect to the different theories of color in design. When it comes to color, one of the things you'll often see is that you have some choices, if you will, some choices as to what color would affect what in your design. And if my little graphic will work here for me, I'm going to give you a very quick overview of some basic color theory with respect to what we like to see in our designs. So what we have here on screen is a fundamental graphic with respect to color design. And if you'll take a look at that sort of that triangle there, what you see is that the colors can be represented in different color spaces. So one of the color spaces is, let me just turn this off here. Sorry, there we go. So one of the color spaces is this, what they call CMYK. So CMYK space is the printer's model. Those are the color ranges that a printer can print. The whole colored area is what the human eye can see. So when it comes to printing in color, there's a tighter range, or what we call a smaller gamut of colors that can be printed with the printer model. The two triangles represent what we see in most computer monitors. So most computer monitors, as represented in what they call RGB space, or like for websites, those are the color models that you see, or the colors that can be represented on a website. But this full range is the way we humans actually see color, and this is called lab mode. And it is in lab mode when we're doing some kind of design with respect to a logo that we do want to sort of think of what color might mean. And what I mean is that in lab mode, some colors have a historical meaning and others have cultural meaning. Once upon a time, and all this text down below is just something telling you that there were primitive eyes, or the ability of bacteria to sense light. And when bacteria were in the ocean, if you believe the evolutionary theory, they would monitor their height in the water based upon 2 factors. They couldn't really see, but they did have light sensors. And those light sensors would let them see during part of the day and decide whether they should swim up to the surface or if they should swim down. And the reason is that ultraviolet light, over here in our little color model, ultraviolet light will actually kill bacteria. And because ultraviolet light will kill bacteria, the bacteria needs to dive and get down deeper in the ocean so that they wouldn't be killed by the ultraviolet waves. But the warming rays of the sun help their biological processes, so they would swim up when it was warm. Now, how could they tell when it was warm or cool? Well, it turns out that how much sunlight was directly reflected against the surface of the water was not a good indicator. But what was a good indicator is how much light there was in the sky. So with their primitive eyes, what they did was they would notice anything in this sort of orange range, and whenever they noticed that the sky was orange, that usually meant that it was either dusk or dawn. And they would swim to the surface, because at dusk or dawn, the light rays have to go through more of the Earth's atmosphere, and therefore the ultraviolet radiation is reduced. And so they would swim upward at dusk or dawn to get warm. But then, middle of the day, they could fry. So in the middle of the day, when the sun was high in the sky was very blue, they would dive down. Now, what that means for our logo design is that in lab mode, the L stands for lightness, and the A and B are these two axes. So any colors along this part of the spectrum, we human beings often have a biological reaction to, if you believe evolutionary theory, because we came from simpler organisms. And those organisms today have eyes that react. And our eyes do too. Our eyes do get damaged with ultraviolet radiation, which is why we wear sunglasses. So our eyes also have this sort of relationship with certain colors. And if you think about it, most people have good feelings around the warm colors, which are represented here, and less with the cool colors that are represented there. The A line along here tends to be cultural. In our culture, in the Western world, green is what we would use for a go light, and red for a stoplight. But that's only cultural. That could be turned around just as easily, and people would still respond. We often think that red is a warning color, but it's only a warning color partly because we as humans have made it that way. So when you're thinking about your logo, what you want to do is you want to look at this thing called culture. So that's the idea of color and how color affects our choices when we're making a logo. Which brings us to culture. So culture is the next area that we want to take a look at as we wait here while my little graphics sort of catch up with us. So some colors are cultural and some colors are what we like to think as biological. And those biological colors give us a sense in the world of what is important and isn't important. But our cultural emphasis gives us another band. So when I'm working up a logo for someone, I will take a look at these sort of color wheels. And what this wheel does is, it may be difficult to see off here on the side, but we have, let's say, Western America. That's band A. So if we were looking, we would follow this band A around and find what that color means in our culture. But here's another simple color chart. For example, in Western culture, black is often death. But in Far East colors, black is health. That's a complete opposite to what we're used to seeing. So here we have color charts. You can have colors by religion, Judaism, Christianity, and looking at these charts helps us decide what color should be in our logo. So we're taking into account, when it comes to color, two things. One is the color that our eyes react to based upon biological factors, and the second is the culture. The culture will also come into effect with respect to naming. So as we're working through our logo design, we're looking at culture for both the naming of our logo, if we don't have a name for our company, but if we do, what colors we should use can often be influenced by the culture. And that brings us to the next of our 5 C's, which isn't a C at all. It's actually shape. So when I say the 5 C's of successful color logo design, what I mean is the 5 C's and the 1 S. Although you could probably spell shape with the letter C and make it sound like an S. But I'm really trying to twist my little metaphor here of the 5 C's. So this represents the S. So far we've gone through 3 different of the C's: cost, color, and culture. Now we're going to get to our S. That has to do with shape. And shape matters. And I've chosen some shapes here to show you. These come from what are called shape libraries. They give us a sense of what a shape might mean. Arrows and banners and buildings. Now here we have a circle or an oval, although you might think, gee, it looks more like a crescent. But essentially a crescent is a part of the general circle family. That basic shape is a circle shape. So when we look at shape families, we're not looking at the generic representation of the whole family. We're looking at more of the general feeling. And we have a feeling of circle here. Clouds and crosses or spirals sometimes. Here we have a wave, a heart. Now notice in this case the heart, I've purposely used a heart with some negative space, because sometimes in our logo we're going to think about negative space. Ink markers and lightning bolts. Now here's one mountain. You might not get the mountain feeling from the black, but look at the white. If you've ever looked at the FedEx logo, you can actually see an arrow in the middle of the space where the E and the X come together in FedEx, or in that in their logo. So here we have mountain represented in the negative space. So sometimes a shape actually gives us the negative space. Shield is a very common, if you have a business that is insurance to protect someone, shield type logos might make sense. Here we have a splatter. Now this looks like a very uniform splatter, but it still has that sense of droplets being connected. Here we have square and rectangle. I've purposely chosen this shape to show you that the feeling of square isn't represented by the rounding of the sides. That is, the sides aren't hard as you'd expect with a square, and yet we have this feeling of square with that shape. I purposely chose this as a star pattern because although the top point of the star is rounded, this is still a 5-pointed object. Swooshes are very popular. Here we have thought balloons, triangles. Now you may think that a triangle is the same as an arrow, but it has to do with the orientation. A triangle usually has an orientation which is different than an arrow shape might. And here we even have wings. So the idea is that we're beginning to look through the different elements that I go through, or other designers go through, when they're thinking about your logo. What logo makes the most sense? What shape makes the most sense in your logo? What color makes the most sense with respect? So as we keep working through our 5 C's, and yes, I do have one S, that's true, we move then to the idea that we're trying to pick things based upon those both cultural and emotional factors. And sometimes a shape can have an emotional factor as well as a sense of what cultural norms there are. In some cultures, you don't want to have certain shapes. When we're looking at that idea of shape, we also want to take a look at one other factor, which is basically our customer. The 5 C's of customer bring us into the idea of what is our customer look like. Now here we have 3 women. Let's focus on the middle woman and the woman off to her side. If you think of women and you think of, let's say, what design patterns do women find interesting? If these were our customers, what design patterns would they find appealing? And one thing you might think about is a floral pattern for women, like a rose. But what's funny is that not all women look at roses quite the same way. Here we have a rose that might appeal to this older woman, but younger women today like a different kind of rose. So here we have the same customer group, and a rose is a traditional feminine type of shape. And what we're seeing is that 2 different versions of that. When it comes to t-shirt printing, kind of an area that I know something about, that's sort of one of my specialties, what we often see is that in t-shirt printing, we often have a difference in these 2 customer groups. So older women, we have a basic rose. Here, notice the thorns. Notice the thorns in this pattern here. Notice the thorns in this pattern here, and we've got skulls. Also notice that these roses here have these sort of spikes to them. Even though there are leaves, there's a spikiness. We also have a different in color. For this woman, she's wearing a pastel pink shirt. Here we have a red rose. Notice the color is different. These images have been toned. So when you add white to a color, it tints it. When you add black to a color, it shades it. But when you add gray, you tone it. Notice how here for younger women today, these roses are definitely toned. There's a gray undertone to the colors. Even here we have a couple of the roses that actually are in gray. So when we think about a customer in your logo, we want to be very specific if we can. If we are really trying to target younger women, and it was a t-shirt design that we were looking at, we would look at these colors. And the same is true with your logo for your company. We're going to try to pick the logo for our product that makes the most sense based upon that target group. If we're targeting an older woman, we're going to use probably pastels and more traditional colors for the rose. For the younger women, even in our shape, we're going to choose these spikes and the color of our rose. Notice that we're going to tone that. And that begins to bring us to our next category as we move through our 5 C's. We've looked at the shape, the color, culture, and we just started to look at the cost a little bit. We're going to come back. The last C are curiosities. Every product or service has some fundamental fascination or interest or benefit to the customer that they want to get when they buy the product or use the service or do business with a company. And the idea is to think about what it is about your product. For example, insurance companies, typically it's the alarm that we want the customer, when they see the logo, to think, oh, I should do business with that company to help protect my family. So the alarm curiosity, certain products lend themselves to logos that talk about protection and somehow preventing a harm that could come. Other products like chocolate or other food items, often they have the sense of rebellion or lust or passion. Sometimes passion is another area where we try to get someone interested. Rebellion can also be often called innovation, or passion can also be called lust. Sometimes seduction may fall between these, but the idea is to try to figure out what is about your product. Trust, for example, a lot of financial folks that come in for a logo, trust is the most important thing. It's the one thing they really want their logo to compel. So these curiosities are what I sort of go through to think about in the logo with respect to our color, our culture, and also the shape. What engenders these curiosities? And that's the whole idea behind logo, is to balance these curiosities, what it is that the customer wants when they see a logo with respect to that company or their brand, and then from that, working backward, look at the color, the culture, and the shape to build out our logo. So with that fourth curiosity in place, now we can get back to the cost. So the cost, we've gone through sort of the other C's. Let's look at the cost. At the lowest end of the scale, certainly people often have an idea that what they want to have is quick designs or simple designs. But let's start from the other end and see what is it that makes some logos more expensive than others. What do we give up as we move down the cost scale? Typically in this range, you have a full ID brief. What that means is we're thinking about customers and curiosities and culture and color and shape again, but we're also thinking about brand awareness versus brand recall. Now, these two are actually different. So brand awareness is, let's say I'm going into a store and looking to buy a printer, and all of a sudden I see, oh, the printer's by Hewlett-Packard. I see the printer, I see the brand, and I'm aware of it. Versus I see another printer by Guji Fuji or some weird company name. I've never heard of them before. I'm not aware of that brand. So the Hewlett-Packard brand is one that I've seen before, and I have a feeling about that brand. Awareness is a visual thing. It's what we see. It's through our eyes. We see a product, we see the brand name, and we see the logo, and from that we have an associated feeling or thought. But with brand awareness, the sight comes first. Now, brand recall is just the opposite. Brand recall is often thought of as a sound or from our ears, but what it means is that we hear a conversation in our mind with respect to the product. So, for example, brand recall is a person goes into a store and on their list, they see on their list, oh, we need razor blades. It might be a guy, he's doing some shopping, and he needs razor blades. Well, when he needs those razor blades, thinking, oh, razor blades, oh yeah, I need Gillette. That's the brand I want. So what he's doing is he's actually recalling the brand. He could be making the shopping list at home. That is, with brand awareness, he'd walk down the aisle and see the Gillette razor blades and buy them because he has a feeling or thought about the brand. With recall, he's actually making the list. He may be making the list for his spouse and say, I need razor blades, get some Gillette number 5, blah, 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 razor blades. So recall is a process where we think about the brand name first and then take an action. Whereas brand awareness, it's actually the reverse. We often see the brand first. So these two are different. It's not important for our discussion right now. Typically for logo design, we're really trying to build up brand awareness. That is, we're trying to have a logo that will be recognizable and distinguishable from others. So typically with a design brief, we focus more on the design awareness, but not always. Sometimes can be a recall component. And we're typically going to try to choose a logo that can be used for everything. That can be for a packaged good product, also for an app for iPhone or Android in the store where you have that really small logo. It can also be for business cards and websites. So we think of everything. We may also use those colors, by the way, throughout our entire website. So at this level, everything is written down first before the logo is created. Now, as we start moving through the scale, you're going to see this, we begin to drop things. So at the $1,000 level, we still have a design brief, but it's not a complete corporate ID means identity. This is an identity brief. What we're doing is we're creating a complete branding identity for the company. Often at this level, we're looking at the total identity design. Here, we still have a design brief, but it's more a design brief for a specific logo or class of logos. We still think about customer and curiosities and culture and color and shape, but what we do is we identify specific uses. This logo is going to be used on our website, some printed material, business cards, so the use may be broad, but we're not thinking of dictating the colors for the our entire corporation. And so that's the difference, is that we're not looking at broad a scope with respect, typically with respect to color and font choices even. As we keep working our way down in a $500 range, you're often seeing many of the same similar things, but we now have a very general use, whereas specific uses are still identified at the $1,000 level, but it's not a complete corporate design anymore. In the $500 range, we may be saying this logo needs to work as an app, and a website, and our business card, and that's it. We may be specifying some very specific use. It's general use, but it's not as all-encompassing. And obviously, as we go down the scale, things get simpler and simpler. Quick designs. As I say, I start out talking about a disposable design. So quick designs, the idea is that we're still going through those, basically the four C's, if you will, plus the S, and that sort of dictates the 5th C, our cost. But often we're looking for one specific design. I need a business card. I need this for my stationery. I need a logo for my website. And that's what gets the different levels with respect to a logo and the different pricing structures when you're looking at a general logo design. Let me give you a specific example. So I had a client, and this was sort of their old logo. They wrote software. The name of the company was Golden Touch Software. And you don't have to love the logo that I created, but the client loved this. And this was about a $350 design. They went through a design brief first, and then we created the logo from that. He wanted it specifically for his apps and for his business card. Those are his two specific goals. This was the old design. So he writes software. Well, the problem with software is software by itself doesn't have a visual look. That is, what is a software? Well, if I said what's a deer or what's a bird, well, we know what we have a shape for bird, but we don't have a shape for software. So in the past he used from another company designed logo with a very generic CD-ROM, because once upon a time software was delivered on CD-ROM, and then he had this golden zap coming into it. That was his old design. When I came to him, or sorry, when he came to me, I should say, and we started looking, I had a couple challenges. I had to get the words golden, touch, and software. He wanted all those things represented in his logo. And he's a software developer, and he said to me, I like to have fun. I don't want this to be too serious. So I started to think, well, what's going to give us a logo that will have all those pieces in it? So what I did was I created, to get the sense of software often connects things. So I came up with this sort of connected grid. And he really liked that. I had about 8 mock-ups that I showed him. I had a lot of mock-ups, but he liked this design. So it gave him the sense of connectedness. I wanted to bring in touch somehow. So here we have touch engendered in that things are touching each other. This also has it has a feeling of software, because software connects things, and he got that and he liked this. This is kind of a network diagram. So he dug this design. This was the one he really liked. And it did for him what he wanted it to do. I don't care if you love this or not. He loved it. The client loved it. That's the important thing, is it did what he wanted. I brought in the gold, but I brought in a more sophisticated gold, not sort of the yellow gold, but a gold color that will look good on a business card. Very professional, because he charges professional fees. So I sort of brought gold in. I got sort of the touch in a couple different ways with the pointer here. I got the word software in with this connectedness, and also when we think of computers, we often think of arrows and these sort of hands. Now, the reason it's so blocky is that he said he wanted a sense of fun. So I brought in a sort of an 8-bit design hand. And he loved that. He thought that was the coolest thing, because it brought in a sense of fun to everything. It is Golden Touch software, but the hand really worked for him. It brought in the sense of touch, and it again reinforces software or computers. So we have the word software represented 2 different ways. The 8-bit hand and also the connections. We have touch represented two ways. The finger is touching an area, and the touch is flowing out through the network design. And we have golden only once, but that's a fine. That was okay. And then the font, what I chose were several different fonts, and one of them was the old IBM style font, and he got that, and he loved it. He liked this. He liked all the parts of this design. Now, whether or not it's going to do everything that he needed to, there wasn't any cultural conflicts. There was no color conflicts. We used a much richer gold as opposed to a yellow. That should play well with his business clients. But the 8-bit hand works well. When this design gets rendered down for a small device like a iPhone, we're going to lose the word Golden Touch software altogether, and we're just going to have this upper block of the hand and the globe, and that will work well on a device. All these little dots are going to shrink down, become very, very small, but it'll still play well in as an icon for his apps, which is what he wanted. So there's a simple design. It wasn't particularly difficult. It met his needs. He liked it. He saw several versions, and we considered all those things. It's not important that you love his design. What's important is that he loved it. And that's kind of the point sometimes, is that we're really designing things for the person's purpose, whether it's to thrill a customer or not. So those are your basic 5 C's of successful logo design. I hope you enjoyed watching my video, and there's some other mock-up designs just for kicks. If you're looking to make a design on yourself, or design for yourself, I should say, go ahead and review this again. But the 5 C's will help you walk through what should be in a successful design and give you a sense of why different logo designers charge different prices for different work in the logo space. Thanks for watching. I'm Eric.